Thank you for being with us tonight in a very special context of the summer program. Tonight we have a very special guest for us. She's Vivian abenshushan, who will be share her work with us tonight. Thank you, Vivian.
So, thank you very much for being here now after these 3 long weeks, and we are going to have this conversation in English because it is part of the summer program. I hope the GTP did a good work last night. But if there are words I cannot find easily, please help me. We can make this conversation together. And I will sometimes speak Spanglish and ask you for help, and you can just shout from there, no, it's not that way. Thank you. So I'm really very happy to be able to share with you the work of a long, many years of around an unnamed practice. I used to be a writer. I think I am not a writer anymore because there's been like 5 years, yes, like 5 years, that I don't publish a book, although I'm making research and sometimes I still write very late at night. But in the last years, my practice and my relation with writing has changed radically. And maybe I write in other terms, with other intentions, with other formats, and with other political questions. And I don't have like this artistic practice of having very good documentation of my work, so you're going to see raw material of what I do. I brought some objects, the things I found in my studio before coming here yesterday and today, and I will be choosing them randomly, but if you want to take an object and look at it, just please give them back to me at the end of the session. And if you have questions, particularly about something here, we can also make the relationships between all these things that are, of course, connected one with another in some ways. I brought rocks, ropes, books, a lot of books. I still read a lot. And this practice, I think that has to do with the relationship between writing, pedagogy, micropolitical questions and practices and actions, and participatory art. So we have to start from somewhere. And I wanted to start here. You can answer or not, if you want, to these questions. Do you feel that your work more and more have less and less, no. Do you feel that you work more and more and have less and less time, money, desire, impetus? Do you think your vacation is too short or too expensive or too boring? Have you ever felt at least once in your life
the desire to be late at work or to leave work early? Are you a freelancer and every month your life hangs in the balance? How many times have you failed to pay taxes because of forgetfulness, lack of time, insubordination? Have you ever thought that the hours it takes you to get to work and back home could be spent making love? Since what age are you a multi-employee? Do you have security insurance? What do you think about during the dead hours of the office? Do you hate your boss? How many times has it happened to you that even when you are off work, all you can think about is work? Do you suspect that even if you worked on Sundays, you would never have a home of your own? How many hours of your free time do you spend looking at Instagram? Spending your paycheck at the malls? Reading? Doing nothing? How many times have you wished you could stamp your pay stub on your boss's head? Do you think the work of 3 or 4 people do you do the work of 3 or 4 people for the paycheck of 1? Do you sleep well? Have you had the misfortune of working for someone who never paid you for your services? Do you want to quit your job but are afraid to take your but are afraid to take a leap in the dark or go without retirement? How many books have you stopped buying in the last 5 years because if you do, you won't make ends meet? And you would... I hope that was a good translation of Tiki. And you still... do you wonder if there's a cure for all of this? What can you do? Stop suffering. Kill your boss. Quit. And the translation. So the first thing I wanted to talk about with you, could you please lend me that book, the red one, the red and black one, yes. Is about this. This is not the first book I wrote, but it is the first book that showed me a way of thinking about writing, relations, politics, and workshops in a very different way. And it is called Escritos para desocupados, writings for the unemployed, or maybe writings for the unoccupied, I don't know. And I wrote it a long time ago. It is, I think I need a little bit more of light, please, thank you. So this book, the genesis of writings for the unemployed, lies in the realization of my own fatigue, my own restlessness in the midst of a capitalist crisis. It is an arc of self-reflections beginning with the collapse of the banks in Argentina, a country I traveled in 2004, in the middle of the Corralito crisis, and the 2008 crisis, the global financial crisis. So in that arc of years, I took a drastic decision and I quit my job. And after going to Argentina, where I spent like 2 months, I went there because it was very not expensive, the other. Cheap. There, thank you. Very cheap. And I had a lot of friends that were writers that were going there. to buy books because they were cheap, and they returned with enormous amount of books, and they had a lot of time because everything was cheap. Although people wasn't happy there because they were in the middle of the crisis, we, the ones that came from the north, could go there and spend a time there. And something very disturbing and fertile happened during the Corralito crisis, that I think was the first big economic crisis of the 21st century, and that somehow anticipated the following crisis. And the thing that happened is that banks broke down, and at the same time the state broke down. There was an enormous civil insurrection to drop the government that was in that moment there. So in the void, in the middle of that, those pillars of the daily life and the global governance, people had to organize their lives in other ways. So there was an enormous amount of factory workers recuperating the factories that broke, and they made cooperatives with them, so they became their bosses of the bosses and the workers of the factories. There were a lot of schools in the streets. There were a lot of other ways of trueque. I think there's no translation for that. There were a lot of independent publishers that were doing books with nothing, with what they found near their houses. There was a publishing little tiny cooperativa called Eloísa Cartonera that was organized by a poet that was a friend of mine, and with workers, or no, unemployed people that were in the street gathering cardboard, to resell it and gain some money. So with that cardboard, they made books. And this cooperativa became very important because they also published a lot of books with copyleft. Lots of writers gave them their rights to publish those books with no royalties. And also later, this publishing house became a, they were so successful with this little, successful in the sense that they continued publishing and workers got their money each month, and they could buy a little parcela, a little field in the country. Lot, thank you. A lot in the country, and then the cooperativa became also not publishing books, but gardening, harvesting, sembrando, seeding, and making food, and so it grew a lot, and it became like a social and living experiment. When I got there and I saw all of that, I didn't want to leave. I just wanted to stay there for a long time and live because I had a lot, I didn't have money, but I had a lot of time to write and read and meet people that were really experimented other ways of social organization, of community life. And I walked a lot during the day. And there was also this very powerful movement of stencils that were like somehow the way streets were, the walls of the streets were dialoguing with the moment, the historical moment there. And one day I found this stencil, and I thought with this ¿cómo se llama el señor de los Simpsons? Mr. Burns. The sinister Mr. Burns pointing me with his nose. And at that time I was working in a magazine and I was very happy because they had made me the director of the magazine, and the magazine was called Complot, so I liked it more, and I accepted with a lot of joy. But the magazine had just been bought by a very famous photographer that wanted somehow to make it more rentable. So the Complot possibility disappeared, and it became a very mainstream magazine where I worked for 12 hours a day, and I didn't have time to write, to eat, to do not anything. So when I saw this stencil, in those 2 months I went there, I decided that I was going to follow the instructions of The Simpsons. And when I came back, I killed my boss symbolically, and then I convinced my couple to quit his job. He also worked in a cultural magazine that was very interesting, but that had to be rentable, and he quit. And he convinced the designer of the magazine to quit. So we were 3 unemployed artist writers in the city with a lot of time, and after that 2 things, very important things happened to me. The first was that I started a blog that was the prehistory of internet. But that was a very enthusiastic moment for writers to have a different relation with readers and with writing. So I have this blog where I reflected on the working conditions and every day, and there were a lot of people. I wrote it anonymously in that time. I was reading Hacking Bay and all the autonomous zone, temporary autonomous zone, and Tikkun, and other collectives that made very radical critics to the neoliberalism hegemony. And I wrote that anonymously, and a lot of people start to answer the posts. So I had heated discussions with a lot of people. Of course, there was a lot of people saying, "You're a vagabond, go back to work, stop doing this, it has no sense." There were defensores del trabajo ultranza. But there were also a lot of people sharing their situation with work. So I wrote in this blog the way my voluntary unemployment was going on, the problems I had, how long I could really stay without a work. Then I received a scholarship, so I could write the blog with that 1 year more. I didn't receive the scholarship for the blog, of course, but for another project. And then I had a baby, and I had to come back to work. But after 3 or 4 years of research about the terrible conditions of work under the post-Fordist division of work, and the way it just ended with the possibility of the workers' organization and the idea of strike, I started receiving, because my post kept growing and growing and growing, because the research became more complex and more complex and more theoretic, and people asked me to cut them, to shrink them, because internet, you need to read faster. So I stopped writing that blog, and I noticed that I needed time to think. So I went back to the slowness of writing, and the slowness of thinking, and the slowness of the book, and I decided to make this book. So that's the story behind this book, and the murdership of my boss. And when I published the book, I published it in an independent publishing house, or also very tiny one that was not in the Mexico City but in Oaxaca, called Surplus, that had also this social concern about writing and how writing should somehow become a critical space. And I decided, with the complicity of the publishers, to publish it with a copyleft license. In that time, in Mexico, there were no copyleft licenses. It was an unknown territory. And the book also has a big chapter about sharing knowledge and how knowledge is a collective construction. So, but I missed a little bit the interactions of the blog. So I decided, and the things that internet allow, but books don't. And that it's not interaction, but hypertextual connections and links. So I made this this web with a lot of the research, with videos, documentales, short films, pieces of artists, and you could download the book freely there and like move there from one place to another. And I just disappeared it last year because it was too much work, and the idea of the book was for not working so much. And I also stopped researching and writing the book. One day, I just remember that. One day my little son, came into my studio and knocked and looked at me, very angry because I didn't have time to play, and said, "Mom, are you still working against work?" So that little word paradox made me think I should just stop there, because it had taken a long time, this research. And after that, I was also somehow, I have to say a little more of the context. I started writing in a very difficult period in the 90s. That is a period when neoliberalism established as not just as an economic model, but also or political model, but also as an architecture of desire, of collective desire, and of aspiration, and of daily life, a way of life, and a way of subjectivity. So, when I was at the university, I was very interested in collective writing. When I was a teenager, I loved the Dada, surrealists, and the situationists, and all of that, and I thought that writing was that, like making desmadre with a lot of people. But when I came to the university, this new way of thinking and living was installed in the academic productive machine of papers, to publish or perish, and that same to publish or perish was the way literature was now organized or understood by writers. So I always felt very like an orphan because there was nobody interested in collective writing, and that was even seen with suspicion, like collective things. That was the time of the fall of the wall. My father put all his Marxist books on the back of the library because things had changed drastically. So anything that had to do with a collective life was like being conservative. That was like part of the things that changed. Words changed all the way around.
So I had to invent a place to survive. And somehow I found it in workshops. That's what I really do in my life. So and something else. For the first book I wrote, that is that one, not the second one. I hope I have wrote Sigo Disobedience. That is this one, El Plan de los Insomnes, the Insomnia Club, or something like that. That I wrote because that was the thing you had to do to be a writer, to publish in a Spanish publishing house. So I looked for it and I did it. And when the journalist, the cultural journalist, came to interview me, I noticed they never had time to read books because they were so overwhelmed by their jobs. They had to read like thousands of books a month and interview the writers. So I thought that was an absurd dynamic, cultural dynamic that had no sense. And for this book, I tried to do it differently. So when journalists came to interview me, I interviewed them. And I asked them how were they doing, how were the economic issues, how were their labor conditions. And I noticed that all the cultural dynamics were rotten. So I decided to make not presentations of the book with an author presenting you and saying you're the greatest writer in Mexico and please buy the book, but socializing the book in different spaces. And I was invited to hacker spaces, to independent spaces, to espacios autogestivos. Please help me.
Artist run.
Like so
Artist runs.
artist.
Interesting. There's no translation for autogestivo. Okay, so spaces that were
do it yourself.
yes, like do it yourself.
Do it yourself, experience.
Yes.
Self-managed.
Self-managed. Thank you. Thank you, Google. And I also went to other states and communities. I went to Calpulalpan de Méndez because the publishing house was there. The Calpulalpan de Méndez is a little tiny town in the Sierra de Oaxaca where communality is still a way of organizing the community. And that was very interesting because they didn't understand why I was against work, because they understood work in a very different way. And I also, in this travel, so I made like this imaginary school, the traveling anti-work school, and I moved all over the place, and I went with my little library, also portátil or mobile library everywhere. And we had a lot of Marxist theory of the alienated work and what is plusvalía, and we also talked about women on paid work, and we in those sessions so I began doing that, and a lot of artist schools and seminars that were given to artists asked me to come. So I started giving these seminars and workshops for artists. And this series of seminars that were under different formats and durations given to artistic producers became very important for me, because I thought that
it was precisely there, at the very center of the cultural production, where we were missing that conversation. A discordance that would break the silence in the face of one of the most deeply rooted myths of the endogamy of art, its neoliberal consensus. Here we talk about everything except the material conditions in which art is produced. And so I gave these workshops. They were very rough, tense workshops, because I noticed the problem was that there was a lot of opacity in that time. Things have changed a lot since then, I think. You can tell me. And there was a great silence around the precarious conditions in the field of art and cultural, art and culture. So there was a lot of unpaid work, voluntary work, and it was so normalized that people didn't even notice they were being exploited. So I'm giving all these details because I understood that the anti-war school had to become a more complex space of cultural agitation and awareness rising. That is to say, I had to think about how to create a space, a safe space, one of trust and not just of theoretical daring, so that the participants would be encouraged to speak. And when they did, it was brutal, disconcerting, and astonishing, because the stories all the participants, almost all, the 99% of the participants shared were about this very normalized, very high level of exploitation. So, this is the school, this is... So, I worked around two questions. What is your precariousness and what is your strike? The first question named the problem and the second pointed to a possible organization of the discomfort. But this second question also made me understand that we did not know how to organize ourselves. So we didn't have the slightest idea to what to do, where to go, how to, because we were all struggling for life, and we were all capitalist, post-Fordist, unmaterial, semiotic capitalism had divided the world in such scattered pieces that it was impossible to organize. So, this experience radically transformed my practice forever. And, well, we saw a lot of organization in every other countries, but not in Mexico. So we saw cooperatives of artists in Europe. We found art workers organized in the States, and even in Argentina. But in Mexico was something that was just beginning to be enunciated. So, so I learned that I had to imagine and create and learn dynamics, methodologies, and devices that would allow reconnecting the collective body. And since then, I've been devoted to that research that is ongoing all the time. And I will come back to the workshops later. I will stop here for a minute. Any questions? Do you want to take a book? To ask about something?
I have a question.
Yes?
Just to be clear, you were doing these, you were doing these workshops with people who were artists or like working in art institutions or at all of the above? Okay.
Yes. Sorry for my English.
Oh, no.
But yes, at the beginning, no. At the beginning, I was
working with these hacker spaces and communal spaces. But then I was invited to Centro de la Imagen. I gave one here, actually, about semiotical capitalism with brilliant students, by the way. And not really, I'm not flattering. No. They actually became like, they made a little network, so they still work together after being in SOMA. They learned something, I think. But afterwards, yes, and I did like doing that because that is the territory I inhabit, and that I know and that I suffer too. So it was important. Anything else?
About the blog you said you did when you came back from Argentina. Is it still open?
I don't know. But maybe yes. Desocupados with K. .blogspot.com.
My next question was if you ever go back there, and how does it feel to read you, and how is it to read?
No, I never came back because the blog is another. The blog is like, it has another rhythm, and books, they still have this thing with language that I rewrite a lot, and I can spend 8 hours in a single page. Yeah. Yeah, that's what we are not going to be reached, never. And yeah, so, but that freedom of that speed of the blog and the daily writing, that freed me a lot too. Yes.
So you ever regret something that you said, something that you wrote?
Yeah, sometimes. Like when I have to read it in front of a public, for example. Yes. Well, the other thing that happened after this Argentinian episode was that we, the three unemployed, had a lot of time, so we decided to occupy our time making books. And we founded Cooperativa, a cooperative, a little independent cooperative publishing house with no money, but with a lot of anger and a lot of, we had the necessity, is it okay, to question the unquestionable. Mexico was just like entering a democracia, and we were just in the middle of the NAFTA thing, and we were going to become first world country, but it wasn't real. So we thought there were a lot of, that a public discussion was needed. And there were not many spaces at the time. Things have changed, I think. So we made these very against publishing house. We were basically against everything. So we published books against love, against, of course, contemporary art, against copyright, against the joy of living, against originality, against television, against active life, against homophobia, against beauty. And the last book we wanted to put in that collection, that was the one I preferred, Versus, was called Against Everything. But we never did it. And we called Tumbona Ediciones. This is an exposition we just did in the university. Because Tumbona is, I don't know in English, deck chair, or where you go and read and do nothing.
Lounge chair.
Lounge chair, yeah, yes. And we hoped that we would have a lot of time to read,
and right, but becoming a publisher is all the contrary. So we never had time. We worked a lot. I brought some pictures of us working. There is Veronica Gerber, that was also a teacher here. And after counting books, we always had a mezcal. But I wanted to say two things. That this cooperativa, a publishing house, was also not just a place to publish things we wanted to publish and that we thought that were important, but it was also a vital experiment, an economical experiment, a work organization experiment. We learned a lot. We made a lot of research about cooperativas in the world and cultural cooperativas at the time, and how they did really change the conditions of the people that work there, and the way decisions are made, not in a vertical way, but in a horizontal and sometimes chaotic way. A collective organization is not paradise. It's very difficult and very slow. We were very, very slow. But that was good. That was, I think, we're going in another sense that the capital speed. And we also wanted, and there's where troubles came, we wanted to make a network of independent publishers because it was very difficult to survive in the shark economy of big publishing houses. And we did anything to organize with others, but it became more difficult. But we did some things. We could organize with publishers from Argentina and Spain. So I think something is happening in Mexico. We have to think about that. And we made a lot of collective statements with them, and a lot of intercambio de saberes, or sharing knowledge, and we helped us a lot. And I think we could last 15 years because of that help of the network, of the publishing network. And we made a lot of, events together, and we could go to Spain, and then they came here, and we went to Argentina because of that, that believing in sharing the problem, no? And looking for solutions together. And I also wanted to say, that's maybe the last thing I say about Tumbón Ediciones. If times it begins to, if we have to stop, you just tell me, please shut up, and I will. So, for us, it was also important to think about the book in other ways, not in the traditional and the conventional ways books are thought and produced. And we started working with a lot of artists. We had a collection that was called Anomalias, Anomalities, where we made books that not always seemed books, but were also pieces, but were many things. And in that collection, we published the archive of Ulises Carrión, that was a writer that left writing and became an artist. And at that time, that he was like a very unknown artist in Mexico, although he wasn't in Europe. And after that period, he became very known and read, and he had this book that later became very important for me, the El Arte Nuevo de Hacer Libros, the new art of making books, where he said that he made this concept and practice of the, how can I translate? La obra libro? I don't know. Yeah. And
work of art in the form of a book.
The work of art in the form of a book. Thank you. And he said in this essay that the problem with books is that writers write books, but but there are other workers that make the material book. And in the art of the new art of making books, artists and writers should make also the material a part of the book, not just the writing. No, well, that, and that became important for me later, just to keep in mind. And we did a lot of things in the like actions and in libraries, in the streets. And this is another concept I would like to share with you. We thought that writing and books and libraries and publishing houses could be a convivial tool. That is a concept that comes from Ivan Illich, that was an Austrian thinker that lived for a long time in Mexico in the 70s. That he was very near to the anarchists, and he was a very radical social critic. And he wrote books like let me see my notes. La sociedad desescolarizada, The Schooling Society. He had another that was called Medical Nemesis, Against the Expropriation of Health. And he wrote another that was called Tools for Conviviality. And he said that the convivial tool is a tool that does not enslave you or other people, but on the contrary, produces community agreements on their use. So this is not a convivial tool. This is just the other contrary. Like a public or a communal library is a convivial tool because the users, yes, the usuarios, the users of the library can make agreements of how it functions, when it opens, when it closes. But you, as a reader, you can go there with no academic program and read the book you want at the speed you want and learn by yourself or share with others. That autonomy of education, your education or communal education, makes the communal library a conviviality tool. And we thought at the time, I still think, but it's not easy, that writing, publishing, art itself can be a conviviality tool. And maybe we can talk about in the last part of this conversation. So here are some books from Mona, if you want to look at them, if you have questions. Okay, I think we are late. No? It's okay? It depends on you.
We're not in a hurry.
Great. So, there are other two things I've done during these 20 years or 25 years, I don't know, I'm getting old, of research, and they have to do with workshops. I started giving workshops in a museum, writing workshops. The first time I gave a workshop was in the MUCA in La UNAM. That was a big museum. And they invited me because they were like desmontando una exposición. Taking down an exposition, and the space was going to be free for 2 months. So they gave me that space, and I said, oh, this space to put a table and sit around and talk about texts, that is such a desperdicio that I'm not going to do it. Such a waste. Thank you. So I thought that it might be the moment I could start experimenting this collective idea of writing, more experimental, more performative, more with the body. And I started there, and I've been doing that for a long time. But I was interested in collective writing because I think that we always write with borrowed words, and that language is a common place, not a private place, and that writing, as any other cultural action or way of transmission, is not done alone. We never write alone, even in our very lonely, how did Virginia Woolf say? In a room of our own. Not even there, we are alone. So I've always thought that when we write, we are a multitude, and that when we write, many voices speak at the same time. So that the idea of originality, authorship, genius, talent, and all these romantic concepts and conventions that still work in the literary world are like dated or have to be rethought. So in these workshops, that was also an answer to Margaret Thatcher and that neoliberal moment of our lives when I started to write, and she had this very famous and terrific statement that was, economics is the method, but the goal is to change the heart and the soul. And I thought that the heart and the soul were the space where art and culture and writing and books and reading have a space. So that to intervene in changing the heart and the soul, or to confront that new subjectivity, art had a very important role to play. Well, and I just wanted to show this large amount of methodologies, research, dynamics that I've been borrowing from many places, from popular education, from Paulo Freire's methodologies, from the way the anarchist groups make groups of studying, from participatory art practices, and even from other disciplines or other spaces like the hacker spaces and the hacker ethics. And I am very interested in talking books and reading bodies more than books themselves. That meaning, what happens with books after being published? Which conversations can they provoke? What discussions, what debates, what mobilizations, what kind of real intervention can they provoke? And there are a few questions that have been surrounding me for this time, and that I will be reading. What happens to bodies when they gather to write together? What does it mean to write with others, alongside others, in the middle of the crowd? What relationship is built between a collaborative writing procedure and political counterpedagogy? Can writing together also be an art of organizing life in common? And I'm very interested in these talking books and written bodies because I think that literature and writing have also become a very prestigious space for specialists and for experts of the word. And that we all have words and we can all tell our story. I don't mean that everybody can make literature, but we can all use writing for sharing our stories and experiences and collective experiences. And a lot of these methodologies, or little games, I always use very raw material, very cheap things that anyone can buy anywhere. There is no sophistication and materiality of these workshops, but in the way we think together about them. And they usually had to do with what happened after these workshops is that we think a lot about what happens when we try to get organized. That is a big question of these workshops. How do we compromise? How we don't? So it is not about literature anymore. It has nothing to do about literature, or even words. It's a tool to discuss other type of problems that have to do with encounter, that have to do with affection, that have to do with care, that have to do with situated lives, that have to do with political moments. And I think that these little things, the things we write, are just the register of those conversations. But the important things are those conversations. And these, yes, it is here. These, how can I say this? The only thing I don't like about workshops, that's the truth, is that they finish. They start and they have an end. And I really would like that we could have time to not just make a simulacro of organizing life, but really have time to get together for more long time. Because otherwise we just talk about it, we like feel how it can be and how beautiful and difficult at the same time, how terrific, and it's like hell trying to organize with other people, but at the same time it's better than being alone. And I've been thinking for a long time for that. So if you want to make a school with others, you can call me and I'll be there happily. And also in the last years, body has become a very central part of the explorations, because I've noticed that there is no real collective action or collective writing or collective anything if the body is not involved somehow. And because the body has another knowledge that is not the knowledge of words or theory or discussion or logic, but it has its own language, and it helps a lot to make. The last school we made was during the pandemia. It was called Escuela, with a lot of artists from very different fields, and we walked to the forest that surround the city, and we made sessions one or twice a week to read and draw and think together about what's happening at the time. So and I will finish with this maybe. The way I conceive a workshop is always starting with a question that is bothering me, or something that is that discomfort makes uncomfortable, or that I'm suffering, or a problem that I feel. And like the last one was about slowness, because after the pandemic, I think the speed of the world just became unbearable for me, and of work and of everything. And we made these groups where we studied, and where we all, not just me, made the dynamics, the methodologies, which books to read, where to go, who to ask. So some of the ideal workshop is made by the students, not by me. And the questions and the research and everything is done by me. And that's it. And of course you're here. Well, that's. Well, I wanted. No. Sorry, Maury. I left the participatory projects. Well, I'm sorry. I will talk just about this. This one. I have to emphasize, it is not my project. It is not an artistic project. It was not done by me, but by a collective that got together during the violent crisis durante el calderonismo, and this is called. This was like a carnival we made to rename the Estela de Pus with a lot of other artists. Because the Estela de Pus, I don't know how to translate the Estela de Pus, it's impossible. La Estela de Luz was a monument that was a very, maybe you have seen it in Reforma, where the Centro de Cultura Digital is. There is a big, awful tower. And that was built during the Calderon government, while thousands of people were killed because of the war, the anti-drug war, and there was a lot of fear and a lot of suffering and a lot of social anger, and he constructed that instead. And he constructed it to celebrate, I think, the Bicentenario. Yes, that's right. The Bicentenario of the independence. And there was a very non-corruption economic problem there, as usual. And it cost much more than it should, and well, we decided in that moment we were making a lot of things in the streets. Yeah. This collective that was called Sensacional Inoperante was anonymous. This is the first time. I think I shouldn't be grabando esto, but we swear we wouldn't make this it wouldn't become a piece of art. It wouldn't go to the museum. But I think it was the way we were understanding how these collective writing methodologies could be shared in a social moment that was needing it. So we called for a collective meeting in the Estela de Pus, to rename it collectively. Which is the correct name you want to put to the Estela de Pus? And it was, we met there with globes, and with my son, so sorry? Balloons, thank you, balloons. So that the police could think it was a party to celebrate. And we brought a pastel, a cake, and velitas, and we were singing. And after then we took out our megaphone, and we brought these cardboard boxes, and we piled them, and we had a desk with pens and just paper. And a lot of people came that day. And there was a lot of verbal popular imagination that was extraordinary. And we made a ceremony to inaugurate the Stella de Pus, and a lot of cars that were in Reforma stopped and just went there. There was a chaos. It became very tense with the police. Afterwards, someone climbed the tower, and since then there is a lot of surveillance there. And the ceremony ended, all of us letting the Stella de Pus just fall down. And then afterwards, the people that gathered there, these are some of the names they gave to the Stella de Pus. We then made a fanzine and something like that. But then we just move away a little bit, and people started an assembly in the street for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And the last one. In this collective artist assembly, we had a newspaper. This was just before the elections. There was an enormous social movement that somehow gathered the discomfort of many years before the elections, and violence was increasing in the country. There was like very mobilized moment, I think. I don't know what happened then, but we had this newspaper. Sarah Minter was part of the collective, and she proposed to make a false newspaper, as the Yes Men did. And we made like 1,000 copies, and we used to go to the Ayotzinapa gathering, this was after. Yes, we used to go to the Ayotzinapa gatherings with the newspapers and deliver them all around the place, with people that went to the protest, but also with people that was just walking there. And of course, there was a lot of people that thought it was real, that Peña Nieto was leaving Los Pinos. He was just and we made these workshops in the streets and in many places to, this was another way collective writing could intervene in social mobilization. And I think that's it. I didn't talk about this because it's too much, so this one. We can leave that for another time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vivian, for your amazing presentation. I'm sure everyone enjoyed it. Maybe we can start the Q&A session. If you have any question or comment for Vivian, feel free to ask for the microphone.
Thank you firstly, for an amazing sharing of who you are in your practice. I'm curious about, in such an anti-representational, anti-object, and very processual, process-oriented conception of writing and art, what is the role of the representative in your work? And I mean that to say that there are still books here, right? There are still like fixed printed objects, and I guess, yeah, how do you see the role of the representational, both from the making of the object and also the, I guess the role of the book form, particularly?
That's a difficult question. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I think books have a problem and objects have a problem, but not always, because they can be the memory of an experience, a collective experience. And I think they are still important ways of sharing. That's what is important for me. Not the fetiche of the object, but what happens around the object. The things that it can provoke, promote, yes. And I think it is important, it is always important to share experience, and books are still a way of sharing experience. Because we are in a time where experiencing life is disappearing also. And in such a violent world, Walter Benjamin used to say that violence kills experience. And the men that came back from war were speechless. They couldn't share what they lived. They didn't have words. And I think words are more necessary than ever now to re-enchant the world, to share experience, to tell what is going on, to be critic, and to have a place of radical imagination. I think we need other ways of naming the things. And I also think that books and writing can be the place where we can invent new concepts and new words, because the ones we have are not useful anymore. And in order to criticize this world, we have to criticize its words. So we have to invent others and other ways of saying. And I think that there, writing has and words have an important role to play. I don't know if I answered.
Yes, thank you. I'm thinking about this question of body, and I'm wondering how it was for you, this transition or this link with the words, like writing, and then when you discover, or maybe, I don't know if you discovered, but when body arrived in your work, how it was, like how it's arriving and how it displays now.
I hoped I would have discovered that when I was younger. I would have become a dancer, I think, really. But I am 52, and it's not easy to make like body things in this age. It's real. Body has its own. But I found puto dance, and puto dance has to do a lot with reduced body. There's a concept there that is not a healthy body, not a beauty body, not a flexible body, but the body you have. You dance with the body you have. And there I found a place, maybe not for performing, I'm not
not now, but that changed a lot my relations with workshops and also with writing. Yeah, I'm actually working on a project that's called The Rampant Insurrection, that comes from a novel of Italo Calvino that's called The Varón Rampante, a man that decided to live in the trees. And this is a speculative an essay on what would happen if we went back to the forest and to the trees and left it there. And it is also scored, so it definitely changed the way I write, because it is not an essay just with arguments and paragraphs and yes, dense thinking, but also with a score in the margins to get into this.
Someone else?
Will that book be published?
Maybe yes, maybe not. I want to perform in, I was actually training to climb trees, but it's very dangerous. It is very dangerous. And I was like reading in the trees, and it is not easy. I had to yes, ¿cómo se dice? Tie myself to the tree. And maybe it can be both things. It can be published, and it can be an action, or several actions, yes.
I want to read it.
Okay.
We'll confirm it.
You will. Okay.
Creo que no va a estar en inglés,
Maybe the English theme is what is. Pueden preguntar en español.
¿Dónde compraste el libro que está en 3 partes, que está pasando ahorita por allá? Está muy interesante.
Es mío.
Es tuyo.
Sí. Es de lo que ya no nos dio tiempo de hablar.
¿Ya no hay en ningún lado?
No. Ese sí se convirtió en un fetiche. Estoy lidiando con los editores para liberarlo en la red y que cada quien. Yeah, he was asking about that book that is part of a multiple that I didn't talk about because it's too much. We don't need to monopolize the microphone. And it's a book that was published in different versions, and each version was a different way of reading too. It was this sorry, box. This, thank you. That one, and the conventional. And I was telling him that we have no more of those objects. Yeah, talking about objects, because we published a few ones. Yes, and that was about ghostwriting. So the work and the writing came in another iteration. I was a ghostwriter when I was young. That's awful. It's the worst thing in the world.
For who?
I cannot remember his name. When you write the contract, you have to forget your name when you become a ghostwriter. But I really don't remember. When I wrote the book, I tried to remember. He was a very rich man, an empresario, that wanted to write a book. Yes.
Good for him.
Did you include subliminal messages?
The first part of the archive is just about that experience. Yes, it's a testimony. Okay. So thank you very much. If there is a book, you can still look at it, take a look, but afterwards, please do it. I've lost many books in this kind of thing.
Thank you very much for coming this night for our Miércoles de SOMA with Vivian abenshushan. Thank you again, Vivian, for your generosity in our summer program.
Thank you.